So a little bit about Bill real quick before he talks. Bill Fletcher Jr. is a lifelong labor and civil rights activist. He's been a senior staffer with the AFL-CIO. He is the former president of Trans-Africa Forum. He's a senior scholar with the Institute for Policy Studies. He's an editorial board member of blackcommentator.com. He's a leader in a ton of different projects, and he's authored and co-authored a number of books, and he's writing a sequel right now, he just told us, which is amazing. So Bill, without further ado, the floor is yours. Please talk to us about why there can be no honeymoon for Joe Biden and why this fight is so important.
So Ryan, thank you very much. And my thanks to RootsAction and to all of you for joining this program today. So there's many different ways to start. You mentioned before, Ryan, about what happened in both the beginning of the Clinton and the Obama years. And I think that that's really important. But I want to start with a story that I like to tell because I think it makes the point. And it has to do with the Battle of the Crater in 1864. The Union troops in the Civil War surrounded the city of Petersburg, controlled by the Confederates. And the Confederate line was very, very strong. So the Union troops came up with this brilliant idea, which was to dig a tunnel underneath the Confederate fortifications, to load the tunnel with very high explosives, and then to set it off. And the plan was to set this off. It would create a massive breach in the Confederate lines, and the Union troops would storm through and catch the Confederates off guard. So they dug the tunnel, they loaded it with explosives, and at the right moment, they set it off, and there was this tremendous explosion, completely obliterating a segment of the Confederate lines. And there was a big hole, a crater that was created. The Union troops stormed into the crater and then did something that was unexpected. They stopped and they sat in the crater and they looked around at the crater and they were just amazed by what they saw. There were body parts, there was this huge hole, and they were just almost paralyzed. Well, the Confederates had retreated immediately when the explosion took place. And all of a sudden they realized they weren't being chased anymore. And so they regrouped, came back, and massacred the Union troops. That's what was called the Battle of the Crater. We experienced something akin to that politically in 2009. In 2009, a major hole was blown in the Republican line. The victory of Obama and the Democrats shocked many people, and it was obviously historic, but there was this expectation that he would proceed through this hole and advance the kind of program that we progressives are looking for. Instead, something else happened. What happened was a level of paralysis, an attempt at being so supposedly bipartisan, being the adult in the room, so to speak. And the advance that we were counting on didn't happen. What did happen in a few months was that the Republican forces reorganized. They realized that they weren't being chased. They turned around, and we had the Tea Party counteroffensive. And we know what that did in the 2010 elections. The thing about this is that there were many people in early 2009, and some as early as late 2008 after the election, who were warning that there was no honeymoon that should have been provided to the Obama administration, that there needed to be pressure on the administration. The thing that many liberals and progressives didn't get is that the idea of giving someone a honeymoon assumes that there's no pressure that they're going to face from any side. And that's completely delusional. From the moment that Obama was elected, there was pressure on him from the right wing in the Democratic Party, as well as from the Republican Party. And yet many progressives in the Black freedom movement and the labor movement particularly sat back and took the position that Obama needed to have space, that the pressure needed to be slight, that he would do what he needed to do. And it got worse. It got worse because then what happened was that when there were some segments of our progressive movement that began to criticize Obama and criticize what was not being done, they were attacked. And they were told, no. Basically, you got to stand down, give him space. In the Black freedom movement, truth be told, you had to have a DNA test before you could criticize Obama. And it became really, really problematic in terms of being able to put the pressure. What we have to understand is, just looking back on what happened in 2009 and 2010, it is very clear that from the moment that Obama was elected, pressure was on him from the right. And the absence of pressure from the left led to, or in fact, I would argue, encouraged him to retreat. So where do we go from here? The Biden-Harris team seems to have learned some lessons from 2009. And some of what the administration has already done is really quite interesting and I think admittedly surprising, including today's announcement that military aid to the Saudis was going to be cut because of the war in Yemen. But that didn't happen just because Biden is a nice guy. It happened because people have been building for years. Pressure has been increasing from different social movements. And it was clear in the campaign that that most forces were not going to sit back as we did in 2009, or in fact, as we did in 93 when Bill Clinton was elected, that something else was going to have to happen. So the imagery we should have is one of being nose length behind Biden, so that should he turn around, he runs right smack into us, that we're standing right there and are going to take the position that there is no backing down, there is no turning around. This is not about the adults in the room. This is about keeping the pressure on. Now, one other thing I want to say, Ryan, about this, and then I'd like to turn it back to you, is that we also have to understand that if Biden is doing the right thing, we can't sit back and just keep raising the bar. We can't sit back and have a period of an approach of no comment. When he does the right thing, we have to support it. I know that for many people that turns your stomach, but the reality of politics is that that's what we got to do, which also means when he's doing the wrong thing, we've got to speak up. You know, when, for example, as we found out that the administration apparently is going with the Holocaust Museum's description of anti-Semitism, which includes many criticisms of Israel as allegedly being examples of anti-Semitism, we need to speak out against the administration. That is not the approach to take towards the Palestinian fight for justice and Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So we've got to stand firm. We've got to be out there when the administration does something that we're opposing. We've got to be speaking up. When they do something that we support, we also need to be speaking up. Final point. This all is taking place in a context where we should know by now that the election in November 2020 was not between Trump and Biden. It was an election between a mass right-wing populist movement and the forces of democracy. That's what was at stake. And this mass right-wing populist movement, within which there are organized fascists, as we saw on January 6th, have not gone away. And they have no intention of going away. And many of them are armed. So the fact that they were defeated on January 6th only means that temporarily they've been held at bay. But we need to put pressure on all levels of government to prosecute these fascists. And that means going to the Biden administration, but also going to your governors and saying that these fascists need to be prosecuted. And when the governors, when the Biden administration does the right thing, we've got to applaud that. And we've got to insist that they continue, that there's no room for peace in our time with fascists. There are no compromises. There's no middle ground. There's no negotiated settlement. These forces need to be crushed. And our demand on the government, on Biden and others, is that they crush the fascists. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Bill. That was excellent. Couple quick questions, and then I'm going to go through some questions in the chat. First, a quick comment is, when we're going after Biden, it's so important that we're consistent. And I think that's what you're getting to, is that we know what we want. And when he meets our expectations, we don't raise the bar suddenly and demand more. We recognize that, okay, he gave us what we asked for. That's good. And when he doesn't, we go after him for it. And I think that consistency is so key. And that's really where our power can stem from, is just having standards. In terms of the fascist movement, I just wanted to say, one of the fights RootsAction and the No Honeymoon campaign was in early on was against Michelle Flournoy to head the Defense Department. And now it's General Austin. And he's not perfect. He's so far from perfect. If you had 100 picks, he wouldn't be one of them. But he's still so much better than Flournoy. He announced, it was yesterday or today, I don't know how much meat this has, but the military is essentially going to be trying to crack down on white supremacy and some of those things that create fascism in our own country in the ranks. And I think that's really important, because we saw on January 6th, lots of those guys were military.
That's right.
And so it's important we crack down on it, where it's stemming from. And I think that's a good thing.
Agree.
And I don't think Michelle Flournoy, who was Biden's first pick for that position, would have done that. So just another reason why this pressure matters so much. So couple questions we're going to go through real quick. I have some, and then there's some in chat as well. David Gordon says, Bernie Sanders led a filibuster at the end of December to force a vote on $2,000 stimulus checks. Many Democrats, including both of his senators, joined Republicans to squash Sanders' filibusters. This is bad. Why do you think these politicians, including Democrats, are pushing against this $2,000 check? Why do you think they aren't giving the people what we need? Or why are they so quick to, after promising $2,000 checks, to come down to $1,400?
I think that there's a few reasons. So for some, it's a political calculation in terms of what can be won. I don't mean that in an opportunistic way. I mean, I just think straight political calculation. But I think that there are other factors, including that there is, the Democratic Party is far more divided than the Republicans are. And there are pro-austerity forces within the Democratic Party that we've seen this in the past, that are either themselves very afraid of expanding the public sphere, or they are fearful that further expansion will chase the so-called moderates away, and that the moderates will become nervous and will move back in a Republican direction. And I think that this actually relates to another question that's in the chat. I think that this is one of the reasons that progressives between now and 2022 need to be thinking about several things at the same time. One is continuing to fight the right, particularly the right-wing populists and fascists. But the second thing is to further advance a progressive program within the Democratic Party and push hard. And that includes being prepared to offer primary challenges in 2022. to centrists. Now, that doesn't mean all centrists, and this is a very tactical matter. One has to look at a situation and determine what the likelihood is of a progressive winning in a particular district. But the issue of accountability can be most felt by the other side when they know that there's the potential of an electoral challenge. We should have learned that from what the Republicans have done in terms of their own shift to the right, the willingness to engage in primary challenges. So I'm not suggesting kamikaze operations. I am suggesting, however, building a leftward force, left-leaning force that is putting pressure and where appropriate is taking on these people.
100% agree with that. 100% agree. And yeah, being tactical about those choices. You look at AOC, how many votes did she really need to win? It's like 17,000 or something was what we needed in that primary versus Cori Bush, who had to run twice. She needed 5-6 times that number of votes. She swung it more than 17,000 from her first run to her second run. So yeah, it's so important to be tactical about those things. Couple more, oh God, bunch more questions rolling in now. How do we reach Biden? This is from Lisa. How do we reach Biden to thank him or to push him? Which is interesting right now because I actually called the White House comment line today because I was hoping for this call, we'd be able to just call the White House as well as our reps. Comment line is not set up yet for the new administration. So you can't even call him right now.
Right.
How do you suggest? I mean, we're reaching out to our representatives today. Are there other ways that you feel strongly about ways we can actually reach him?
Yeah, but they're indirect. See, I think that the most important way to reach Biden is by building organizations in our states and progressive organizations and being very visible. That is visible in social media and mainstream media and getting our messages out. That will be a way that Biden will hear. So eventually that comment line will open up, Ryan. But right now, I really emphasize that we need to build organizations, groups like California Calls, like New Virginia Majority, the Working Families Party, Progressive Democrats of America. There's numerous organizations out there that exist, and where they don't exist, we need to build them. And that's the best way of getting our message to Biden and getting our message to other politicians. They need to look out and know we're going to do something. And this is something we should learn from the right wing, because the right wing is far better organized and far more consistent than we are.
Yeah, completely agree again. Quick comment from Michelle Wells. First off, shout out to Michelle Wells, one of my favorite volunteers. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, Michelle. She just said, FYI, the military rank and file is approximately 70% Black and other men and women of color. That's incredible. I did not know that. So, wow. Got one from John here. Do you have some ideas on what existing organizations I could join that are taking on corporate Democrats in primaries? I think he kind of just spoke to that, but
Right.
then there's Justice Democrats. I think PBA is great. What RootsAction is doing is great, and we're going to continue to grow and continue to expand our offerings. So yeah, there's tons of organizations. Any others you would name drop specifically?
Well, if you're in a union, there are a number of unions that are very active, but you basically name them. And I would say everyone on this Zoom call should get connected with RootsAction. I mean, frankly.
I appreciate that very much. So that's most of those questions. Let's see, I have a couple more I don't think I answered that were mine. You mentioned, and we'll wrap up here and we're going to get to the action in about 2 or 3 minutes. You mentioned the Tea Party and you framed it as almost a counteroffensive.
That's right.
We just went through January 6th. We just went through, or still going through, QAnon craziness. What could the counteroffensive look like from the right over the next 2 years?
I think it could operate on multiple levels. So one way is what I'll call the Reichstag operation, which is basically what the Nazis did when they got into the Reichstag. in the early 30s, before Hitler took over, they were incredibly disruptive. And this is one of the reasons that taking on people like Congresswoman Green is very, very important, because what the Nazis did is that they would laugh. You see some of this going on in Germany today, even with the right-wing party, the AfD. They ridicule, et cetera, and they basically tear down any semblance of normality and civility. So one of the things that I think could happen is, as in terms of the counteroffensive, is continued Republican obstructionism, which is one of the reasons why we should hope that the Republicans become even more divided, and hope that Trump goes forward and sets up his own party, his third party. In fact, I think we should contribute money to help him set up that party. So that's one way. Another form of the counteroffensive on the right, I think, is going to be terrorism. And so what we saw on January 6th was Pandora's box opened. Now, we've known it's been there. We've seen Oklahoma City. We saw the kind of assassinations that fascists carried out in the 1980s, particularly in the Midwest, against various forces. But we've never quite seen something on the scale of January 6th at the federal level. There have been other armed insurrections. 1898, the overthrow of the populist government of Wilmington, North Carolina, by white supremacists, was not suppressed by the state or the federal government. So I think that we have to be prepared for the issue of right-wing terrorism. And that means several things. One is that progressive forces have to entertain various levels of self-defense. And it also means that we have to have very public displays of opposition to the right and demands on government that they do what they're supposed to do. This was one of the concerns I had after January 6th, that there were many people that felt like, well, we can't really go public because it might be dangerous. We can't really go public because it might not be the right time. Now, I'm not talking about people doing something suicidal. I'm not saying go into one of these right-wing demonstrations and start something. I'm saying that we can be doing counter protests in some other part of town. We can on a different day, as long as we are disciplined. And this is, when I emphasize discipline, I'm going to say, and I don't care what anyone says about this, this is why this whole notion of so-called diversity of tactics, forget that. There has to be solid discipline when we're going up against the right, because the right and their allies in the police department will do whatever they can to provoke us to do things that will get people injured and or killed. So we need very solid organization and discipline. And these are the things that I think we have to be prepared for. There's a great group in Massachusetts, Political Research Associates. I encourage people to look up their information. They, for years, have studied the ultra-right. And one of their former people, Chip Burley and Matthew Lyons, wrote the excellent book, Right-Wing Populism in America, which I always recommend in order to get a better sense of the background of what we're up against.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill. With that, it's 8:30 now. We're going to start moving into our action. I don't see any other questions. There's one more question. Are there any attempts of the diverse left groups to join or partner to help enforce discipline?
Not enough.
Not nearly enough.
Not enough. No, not enough. And partly because we still are ravaged by sectarianism within the broad progressive movement, self-righteousness, territoriality. And as I've said to people, we either join together now or we join together when we're in the camps. I'd rather join together now.
I agree. And so with that, let's join together now and take this action now and start putting some pressure on people. We were promised $2,000 checks. I don't know about y'all, but I heard we were promised $2,000 checks. And we haven't gotten them yet. Now they're $1,400 checks. Now you might not, if you made more than 50 grand or 100 grand as a couple, you might not get it based on 2019 income, which has absolutely nothing to do with your experience right now. And so I will pin my video, I guess. So with that, we're going to move into our action. We have a super simple script. We'd love everybody to participate. Let me get this pulled up. I'm going to share my screen.